All right, welcome back to the channel. Jermall, Charlo, and Chris Eubank are having a little tiff, man. And Eubank is calling out Jermall Charlo and saying he wants to beat him because of all things, Jermall Charlo is a jerk who needs to be humbled. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. Chris Eubank, I do believe he is a former 168-pound champion, some variety, some variation of the 168-pound title Chris Eubank held, but he's currently moving down into and fighting in the 160-pound division, and he's the son of, I do believe he's the son of Chris Eubank. Very good fighter out of the UK who trains out of Mayweather Gym when he's in the United States. I think he's a very, very talented fighter. I like him a lot. He's very talented, but I don't know like how technically sound the guy is, or what his prospects are as being the top 168 pounder or the top 160 pounder. But I do believe he's an excellent fighter, and I would love to see him fight Jermall Charlo. Jermall Charlo is the 160-pound WBC champion out of Houston, Texas. Also a very, very good fighter, and I think that this matchup would be really good for both of them because neither one of their names are on the lips of the best fighters in not the best, but the big name fighters in 160 and 168 pounds. Now, Chris Eubank. And there's been conversations about Chris Eubank fighting Jermall Charlo since last year. I think I can't recall who Chris Eubank was fighting, but in the last victory that Chris Eubank had when he moved down to 160, he specifically said that he was looking to fight Jermall Charlo. And I do also believe that it was shown that there's a loose association between Chris Eubank and the PBC, but because Chris Eubank is not represented by Frank Warren, and he's not represented by Eddie Hearn, right? So he's not in that, so he's not with either of the two main promoters in the UK, and also he trains out of Las Vegas a lot. So I think that is a fight that very well could be made, and I think it's one that would be very, very good for both fighters. Now, the reason that Chris Eubank gave for it is, that's neither here nor there. He says he wants to humble Jermall Charlo. He said that he's met Jermall Charlo, and that Jermall Charlo was extremely arrogant, right, and felt like very arrogant, very full of himself. And on the other hand, Chris Eubank considers himself to be a very, very down-to-earth guy, somebody that you can walk up to and have a conversation with. So he didn't appreciate the attitude of Jermall Charlo. So you know how it goes: if we can't get along, we must get it on. So he wants to fight him. Now, the thing about Chris Eubank, in my opinion, is that Chris Eubank, I don't think he can beat Jermall Charlo. The problem, and the reason I don't think he can beat Jermall Charlo, is because Chris Eubank has from what I can see, he has a glaring weakness. And that glaring weakness is an inability to deal with an effective jab. I think that you saw that in both of the losses that I've seen with Chris Eubank. That's been the case. He fought fighters that had good jabs, and he lost. George Groves for the WBA, that was in the World Boxing Super Series, the 168-pound version of the World Boxing Super Series, the one that ended with George Groves fighting Callum Smith, when Callum Smith won the WBA title. Chris Eubank had actually beaten Yaldemir. Yaldemir is a pretty decent fighter, man. At least that's what he showed when he fought Andre Durrell. Chris Eubank had a much easier time with Yaldemir than Anthony Durrell did. I always mix up the Anthony Andre Durrell. He had an easier time than Anthony Durrell did which showed me, man, that Yaldamir was a pretty decent fighter. Not the best fighter in the world, but a solid, fighter, solid, level above journeyman. Not quite, not quite a contender, low level contender, I guess maybe you can call Yaldamir that. And Chris Eubank, dominated him. I think he stopped him pretty quick, dude. He's got very, very heavy hands. Very fast hands. He's athletic, and he's got a lot of heart. And you can see that with the George Grove fight, man. He never stopped coming. But the problem with Chris Eubank is that Chris Eubank, at least in the fights that I've seen, Chris Eubank is always going for, he's trying to stop you, right? And so he's coming forward. He's not really coming in. He's not really coming in behind the jab. He'll try to slip a couple shots, get inside. His shots seem a little bit loopy. And I think that that's the reason why he'll have a problem with somebody that throws a very hard straight jab, very hard jab and a straight right hand behind it. That is pretty much, that's Jermall Charlo, right? If you look at, George Groves has an excellent jab, man. I think, that's pretty much what allowed George Groves to win a championship. That's what allowed George Groves to be a competitive fighter is his jab. And I don't think that his jab is effective or as heavy. It's as heavy or effective as Jermall Charlo. So I could see the fight between Jermall Charlo and Chris Eubank looking like George Groves versus Chris Eubanks on steroids. I just don't think that that's going to happen. I just don't think he can beat him. But from a monetary standpoint, I think it would be a really good fight. Now, because Chris Eubank has I think he has a good name. His father was a world champion, very famous fighter. He's well known in the UK, even though, he doesn't seem to be quite as loved as I would think that as I think that he would be. But obviously I'm not from the UK, so some of those things kind of slip by me. The political climate over there. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he's not promoted by Eddie Hearn, that he's not promoted by Frank Warren, or not promoted by Eddie Hearn, because it really specifically not promoted by Eddie Hearn, because Eddie Hearn is like one of the first promoters that I've seen that really does try to cultivate his own fan base. And he has managed to cultivate a fan base of Matchroom. I don't know if it's a national pride around Matchroom, or whether it's that, and because Matchroom is coming over to the United States and they quote unquote trying to take over take over American boxing. By the way, mission failed, and mission failed badly. Okay, that ain't ever gonna happen. So I'm not sure what it is about Matchroom that has so many UK fans, in love with Matchroom, and maybe that's why they've never been groomed to have that type of appreciation for Chris Eubank, or maybe it's Chris Eubank's, from the outside looking in, his tendency to train in the United States, to spend a significant amount of time in Mayweather Gym and all that. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't seem like, he has an extremely tough backing in the UK, or the type of backing that he should have in the UK. But other than that, man, he's an excellent fighter. I want to see the fight. I think that it is probably the best. If Jermall Charlo stays at 160 pounds, it's probably the best option for Jermall Charlo, because Canelo's not going to fight him. Gennady Golovkin's not going to fight him. He doesn't seem to be too much of a hurry to fight Demetrius Andrade. Now, I don't know if that's the money or whatever it is, but you can listening to the way Ronnie Shields speaks, who's the trainer of Jermall Charlo, and Jermall Charlo speaks, doesn't seem like they're really that they're really feeling Demetrius Andrade, man. Demetrius Andrade is a really difficult southpaw fighter, man. He's a very, very good fighter. But anyway, so Chris Eubank, I think, he would probably fit nicely in that, with Jermall Charlo. Now, if Jermall Charlo moves up to 168 pounds, that could be a really good introductory fight to 168 pounds as well. Chris Eubank, I do believe, started off as a welterweight, and started off as a middleweight, but then he went to 168 pounds. He lost to George Groves at 168 pounds. I think he might have lost to Billy Joe Saunders at 160 pounds. So, but regardless, he's comfortable at 160, or he's comfortable at 168. He's probably a bit of a small 168. But if Jermall Charlo wanted to move up to 168 pounds so he could get in position to, to fight a David Benavidez, or a Caleb Plant, Chris Eubank would be a good fit. Chris Eubank is also, he's from the UK. He's from the same place that the other two champions are, at 168 pounds, Billy Joe Saunders and Callum Smith. So Chris Eubank, as far as a name on the resume and something that might lead and create interest in the fight with the two British. And man, don't get insulted with me if Caleb Smith ain't British. I'll just say from the UK, because I don't know if the guy's from Scotland or he's from Ireland or whatever. He's from the UK. So, but anyway, it might be a good fight, to set up, that has with good optics to set up a fight with the other two UK fighters. Anyway it goes, I certainly hope that the fight happens, but I got Jermall Charlo beating the dude, beating Chris Eubank, pretty easily, man. If not, I don't think he's going to stop Chris Eubank, because Chris Eubank's got a lot of heart, but it's just that jab and that straight right hand is going to be too much for him, man, and it's going to be, I don't want to say taking candy from a baby, but it's definitely going to be a beatdown. And Jermall Charlo is not going to be nice about it. Anyway, it is what it is. You let me know what you think in the comment section, and with that, I'm out. Peace.